Audi Q3 has been the standard entry-level premium luxury compact SUV for quite some time now, but it's getting a little long in the tooth, John, isn't it?
Yep, and BMW has brought us something a little bit fresher in the past couple of years, launching their X1 more SUV body type and this X2 fastback profile, and we all know that BMW is somewhat of the standard in the luxury segment. So how does it compare with the segment standard?
Today we're going to spend some good time with this BMW X2 M35i and take you through all the modern accoutrements that make this such an impressively modern and indeed exciting compact SUV.
But we're going to take a deeper look at the Q3 and find out if it really is dated or if it still managed to keep up in the segment through its practicality and basic appeal.
Let's start off with a closer look inside each of these cars.
Then we're going to hit the road and see which one drives better.
The new Gen X2 launched for 2024, and here in 2025, it feels one of the most modern cabins that you can buy. Here, the big news is right in front of you. It's this new generation digital display. And that matters both for your infotainment, but also the way that you interact with a lot of the really interesting technologies that make this car so much easier to drive than cars in the past. This system is based around what BMW calls iDrive 9. They'll talk a lot about that because they'll tell you that it's very customizable, very powerful. And yes, it looks very slick. You get little 3D models that you can slide around, all kinds of stuff. It is, however, really rather convoluted, even when you've spent a lot of time in these systems. There's a lot here, and as you go through the different menus, looking through the tiles and tiles and tiles, it's just like having 8 iPhone home screens laid out all together while you're trying to find something while you're trying to drive. It's just a little bit frustrating. But then you get to the rest of what it facilitates, which is some really excellent driver assistance, and especially the way that it demonstrates those driver assists to you. We're going to talk more about those on the road, but what matters here is that because of the way BMW has executed this, you get a really clear understanding of all that's happening and all that the car is seeing and doing, so things tend not to take you by surprise. Around it, you've also just got a much more modern cabin than we've had before. BMW had a bit of a design crisis both outside and inside, with some of their cars getting really garish and ridiculous, or on the opposite end, just being really boring and dull. This here is, of course, a top-of-the-line xDrive 35i, and so it does have all of the bells and whistles and nice contrasting materials. We've got some really cool surfaces and nice configurable vents and all that, which are still, mercifully, manually controlled. We also have proper physical volume knob, and these seats are phenomenally supportive. These are the optional sports seats. The regular seats, they're a little bit broader, they're easier for broader bodies or just different sizes, but if these suit you, they're well worth a consideration. If you get in the back, however, things are a little bit different. The thing with the X2 is that it's an X1, it's just a little bit cropped off the top. That's because this whole sport coupé SUV segment is the bee's knees, or so the marketers tell us. What that means though is that you've got a roofline that comes down, and as a result, I'm only 5'8", I'm not that tall, but I don't have a whole lot of headroom. I do fortunately have a good bit of legroom, and that is because this is about an inch longer and wider than the previous generation. Seating back here is reasonably comfortable. You don't have any side support really, although you do get a center armrest here with your cup holders as you would expect. Notably too, these are actually worthwhile cup holders. They're deep enough and have little rubber grippies so things aren't going to fall over when your kids or guests put things in there. Overhead, there is a slight scallop, but if you are planning on carrying taller passengers, the X1 or, as we're going to see, the Q3 may be a better pick. With that, I think it's time we take a look at the Q3 and see what John has to say about that.
So now we're moving into the Audi Q3. Put my coffee in. No, I'm not. Okay, score a point for the X2 for rear cup holders, but otherwise, the Audi Q3 is a bit more practical. It is this square SUV style, and although you'd think that would give it clear superiority in the cargo space, it's not that clear cut. Yes, the Audi has more space in the back than the X2, but when we did our luggage test, we found that it was easier to slide the luggage pieces into the longer X2. So we really had to cram it into the back of the Q3. Moving forward a bit, These rear seats are clearly superior in the Audi. I've got plenty of headroom. I'm almost 6 feet. I've got plenty of legroom here behind a driver's seat that's set up for myself. So really spacious in the back, and it's very basic, comfortable seats. I also really love that this 40-20-40 seat is very easy to fold down. The X2 has one too. It's got kind of a more annoying strap that you have to pull to get this down, but this means I can load up my hockey sticks or skis during ski season or hockey season, which we all know Audi owners really like. On paper, the Audi Q3 matches up fairly well with the X2. It's got a 10+ inch virtual cockpit digital gauge cluster. It's got a 10-inch infotainment system matching the X2, and they're really smooth operating systems that we've gotten used to over the years. Once you get past the nice screens and a beautiful steering wheel, you start to see the cracks in Audi's armor. There's no head-up display to match the BMW X2, and you're getting a lot of black plastic, so it's really drab. And there's this one piece of plastic that's really, really boring and kind of an eyesore in the middle of the console here. The seats are really quite nice, but they are more basic and wide. They're not as supportive. They're not as hugging as the X2. So there's a lot of places where the Q3 just is not quite as competitive anymore. And that's because it is due for a big update in the upcoming model year. So we'll see what that brings us and if it brings it into a more competitive level when it comes to the interior. All right, let's hop back into the X2 and take them out on the road and see how they compare.
Oh, actually, these front cup holders aren't all that good. But we are here in the X2, and man, this thing, 5.4 seconds. Why is it so fast? Well, that's because the 4-cylinder in here makes 312 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque. That is a lot of power. Now, of course, this is not the usual one. This is the M35i. Most of you are probably gonna get the 28i. That runs a slightly more sedate 241 horsepower and the same torque, but that's still more than the Audi. So, how does that feel on the road? Well, really rather nice. This car has been such a surprise for me all week long, and I think that is the first and in a lot of ways most important impression that you can take from a test drive in one of these. You see, compact crossovers are not necessarily vehicles that you look to for driving fun. Of course, every brand wants it to be exciting, but a lot of them just aren't. Maybe that's just me though. John, how do you feel about the powertrain in this?
I was actually very surprised by the amount of power in this, and yes, it can launch. There's a bit of a hesitation, and it's got that 7-speed dual clutch gearbox, which is nice. It's got the paddle shifters, and you'll actually find a use for them because there are some delays in the shifts, but sport mode kind of holds gears for too long. So using those paddle shifters has a point in this small crossover, which I normally wouldn't approve of.
It does indeed, and honestly, it's a bit of a funny spot. Yes, when you pull the paddle shifters, it does override, but they are still kind of slow. Despite being a dual clutch, even once you pull it, it's still a bit more of a fraction of a second.
But you can anticipate it a little bit better if you know what you're doing,
as long as you preempt.
Yes.
So, preempting then, you're in for a good time. And in this 35i trim, you're gonna wanna have a good time. I have been driving this a little bit foolishly, genuinely, quite earnestly all week because it just makes it so easy to pick up and go. And living with it in the city even, I have quite plainly had more fun with this on regular roads than I have in the BMW M2. Now, on track, obviously that's a different story, but that is a really important part of the personality of this car. It isn't just enthusiast nonsense. No, it's that this is actually a fun car to live with. And that's not something we're used to.
Yeah, well, I just drove the M5 Touring a couple weeks ago, so I don't know if I had quite the same levels of relative fun in this thing, but it is entertaining, right? It's got that great launch, it's got that great power, and it's nimble, it feels a bit playful, but on the flip side, I found it was a little bit twitchy. I didn't love it in driving in normal circumstances. It felt like it wanted to dart around, and it was just sometimes, it was kind of always on, and that was a little bit too much for something that is this small runabout for small families or young professionals. So it may have been a little bit too much, but hey, This is the X2 and 35, the sporty version of the X1 with the top engine. So maybe that's what people come here looking for in this segment.
Well, and likewise, if you just go back to the regular X2, the 28i, that is a fair bit cheaper and has still a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine with a turbocharger and still that same torque, but some 60 odd fewer horsepower, well, that is probably a more sensible way around. And first thing in the morning, it isn't gonna lurch out of your parkade unexpectedly and get your blood pumping right there at 6:30 a.m. Whichever one you get though, it is a little bit odd to me that in this model, they've gone away from the tried and true ZF 8-speed automatic transmission that has been in absolutely everything for so long. It's been in basically every BMW product, in Jaguar, Land Rover, all kinds of stuff. It's a good trans, it's a boring trans, and it's kind of slow sometimes.
But it makes sense for this segment. Another thing that makes sense for this segment, because this is going to be a commuter car for a lot of professionals, and that is the advanced driver aids, especially the adaptive cruise control. This thing has got all the latest bells and whistles paired with a beautiful head-up display that lets you know what is going on. I thought it was really good. The one quirk I didn't love about it was that you adjust the distance control through the infotainment system. So that's not as easy as some of the ones that are steering wheel or little paddles like they have in the Audi.
It is a little bit odd that, yes, I'm used to having far more buttons here on the steering wheel itself, and it wasn't actually immediately intuitive whether this 1-0 switch actually switched your zoom on or whether it was to switch the entire system on or off. But once you've got all those systems set up the way you want, you can really just switch them on and forget about it. It is such a breeze and really significantly eases your driver fatigue. On my commutes, I have found myself using the lane keep, the adaptive cruise, and in particular, the active lane change assistance with far more satisfaction than I expected. I've long looked to Hyundai Kia in particular for really the standard in accessible and intuitive and just generally smooth and effective driver assistance.
Yes, I want to point out that in that lane change system, I appreciated how quickly it executes the lane change. I've been in some of them where it takes forever to identify a spot and finally make a move over. This one, you hit the signal, if there's a space, it's already beginning its lane change right when you expect it.
With that, you get a very smooth graphic, a little curvy arrow that shows up on screen or in the head-up display if you've got that equipped. It's really, really easy to understand what the car is doing, when, and why. It never feels like it's wresting control from you. The other thing, in addition to the speed, is the precision, because this can actually make its way into tighter spots than a lot of others that we've experienced. It's really, really quite something. When you're in highway traffic and you realize it's time to merge into the exit ramp for the 404, well, even though there's a lot of traffic there, if you're at pace and there's a spot that's about 1.5 cars long and it seems appropriate, it will actually do that. That said, it won't do anything that seems inappropriate or too aggressive, too eager. It's very, very, very intuitive. And really, I trust its judgment a lot more than I think any I've tested up to this point.
And at the other end of the speed spectrum, the parking aids are phenomenal, right? It's got the full 360-degree cameras, and it's got little radars to show you how much space you have to open your doors. And it's even got the advanced self-parking systems. It can park perpendicularly or it can park parallel. So you just have to identify the spot as you're going by, hit go, and you just use the gas and brakes and it'll do all the steering for you, which is a neat add-on for people that maybe are not so confident in the tight spaces or just like to show off what the car can do for itself.
Something that's really worth noting on that too is that they've updated that system. It's been around for a while and it's still not the quickest, but it now does more than just detect the vehicles around you. Finally, for doing parallel parking in particular, it actually recognizes curbs and other obstacles so that it can use those to more precisely and accurately park in the spot itself and not just in reaction to whatever vehicles are around. That also means that it's not so dependent on the presence of other vehicles for reference.
Yeah, I think we can agree that the updates and the modern advancements they've made with this generation of X1 and X2 have really paid off with a phenomenally good product for this segment.
This I am so thoroughly impressed with and have so thoroughly enjoyed, and that's very rare praise for a crossover in what I still find a somewhat personally silly segment.
Okay, let's go check out the standard of this segment, the best-selling Q3. Oh, where's my coffee? Where's my coffee? Pass my coffee, Al?
This?
Yeah, I need my coffee. Come on. Oh, look at that. Points for the Q3.
So the fun newcomer, that's all well and good. Now we are back in the sensible fella that's been with us since 2019. John, after all these years, how is the Q3 feeling?
Well, it still feels like it's the right thing for the segment, and the sales numbers support that. This is one of the best-selling vehicles in this very small compact SUV segment, and with good reason. It does everything that it needs to do, and it does it right. And Q3 is also powered by a 2-liter inline-4 turbo, as usual, and it only makes 228 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque compared to the BMW's much more power. But I found that it was just fine. I'm fine with this kind of power. It's got an 8-speed transmission that's been around for seemingly forever at this point, and it's got the same issues it's had for a while. Which is a bit lurchy at some low speed and speed changes, but at the same time, it gets going just fine. What did you think about the power in this thing?
The power here is quite all right. This engine, the EA888, is in a lot of Volkswagen Group products. This is the engine that's in the VW GTI. It's also the engine that's in the Porsche Macan T, which, as premium compacts go, is something that I'm actually really quite keen on. All around, it's an engine that is well understood. Technicians are all very familiar with this thing. It's not an old VW ALH, obviously, but it is something that doesn't particularly worry me in the long run. With that said, it is not nearly as spirited as you're gonna get in the BMW, and I think that extends to the transmission.
Yeah, like I said, right? It's like sometimes when you're slowing down, but then traffic speeds up again and you accelerate again, it'll have a really hard lurch, slamming you in. Also, just getting going low speeds and sometimes parking, it tends to delay and then jump a little, which is not ideal. Thank goodness it's a small car for the parking situations.
On handling as well, this is actually a smaller vehicle on a narrower track, but it definitely doesn't drive with the vigor that I think we found there in the BMW.
No, it drives more normal. It's like a normal car. It's doing what you expect it to do. It doesn't dart into corners. It doesn't like hold a line. It tips over a little bit because it is also taller, so you don't have that same stability and flatness in corners, but at the same time, it's this small little crossover. That's kind of exactly what I was expecting, and it's easy to drive accordingly. It's also got good visibility through the big windows and through the rear window, which was something I found a bit compromised in the X2.
This is definitely a big advantage over the X2, and honestly, even the X1. All-around visibility here is much better, and in Canada, we don't get the Q3 Sportback, so there isn't a compromised version that we have to consider in this test. All told, this is just a somewhat unremarkable drive, but that is the brief. It is supposed to be. This isn't supposed to be something that's in your face that necessarily wakes you up in any particular way. This is just supposed to be a car that is a little bit more premium. This is basically a Tiguan underneath the Volkswagen, which is also a wonderful car and sells phenomenally and was just updated this year. But it serves someone who doesn't necessarily want to pull up in just a VW Tiguan.
One of the things I did find a little bit surprising is despite the less power, it's not as efficient. We saw our real-world numbers land at 10.5 here in the Q3, and they're all the way down at 10.1 in the BMW X2, with you driving like your pants are on fire.
Indeed, and the official stated Enercan figures are, as you would expect, better as well. One further distinction between these two, though, is the ride, in that there isn't really much perceptible difference, even though there honestly should be. BMW has a clever new system in these new generation X1, X2 products that has some clever additional valving to better softly control rebound when you go over really harsh stuff. Unfortunately, though, I still find that the X2 is a little bit harsh over certain obstacles, and I think we're feeling the same here.
Yeah, I think it's surprising that both were quite so stiffly sprung, and they are a bit jittery on rough roads, and they're showing their more dynamic, sporty character far more than I would expect in this segment. I would expect them to be a little bit more pleasant and maybe even a little bit softer and cushier, but hey, they want their brand to represent those kind of driving dynamics. and that's what they've gone with.
Also lacking a little bit of soft cushiness is the auditory experience in here, because there is quite a bit of road noise that comes up here in the Q3. The BMW X2, well, that enjoys some slightly superior noise insulation, including double-layered acoustic glass. That being said, well, that BMW has the optional upgraded Harman Kardon audio, which is decent. The Sonos setup here in the Q3 is absolutely the superior setup. Of particular note, I've really been enjoying the center driver that's positioned up there in the dash. There is a lot of thump to this, and not in an over-the-top, overwrought bass kind of setup, just in a nice depth to range. Though I have to turn it up a little bit more to overcome that road noise underneath, it's ultimately a more satisfying listening experience here in the Audi.
The excellent sound system also pays dividends for it as a highway cruiser. I did find the Q3 was a better highway cruiser. Despite the X2 having that wider track and you'd expect it to be a bit more stable, that twitchy steering still sort of showed up sometimes on the highway. And this Q3 just felt a little bit more planted and solid driving down the highway, and I just enjoyed it more for that experience in that setting.
To be clear though, that better highway cruise, John is referring to the driving dynamics specifically. If you are doing a long distance cruise, you will likely find that the assistance that you get there in the BMW, especially once you've got more of those set up and enabled, it is just generally a less intrusive, more trustworthy, and ultimately just more contemporary setup. This feels dated. It will sort of bounce like a bumper car in between those lines, but it's not exactly tidy in the way that the BMW is, nor is its adaptive cruise necessarily lackluster, but it's not exactly stellar either. Finally, those lane keep assists, you don't really need them, and indeed you shouldn't be relying on them. But showing and experiencing what is possible in that X2, well, it does shine a light on what it feels like this older generation Audi product is lacking, and especially when it's held up against the competition.
Yep, and it's the same with the parking aids. This does not have the advanced level parking aids that the BMW did, but that doesn't actually make it any harder to park. I found that when I was parking it myself, the excellent visibility and the same turning radius meant that I could fit this into any spot I really wanted to. These are small cars, and I don't find that there's any difficulty at all, and they're actually a pleasure to kind of slide into a lot of small spots that a lot of our bigger vehicles don't get into. Well, after poking around the interiors and taking them out on the roads, I think we kind of have a decision, but one other factor we haven't discussed yet is the price. The Audi Q3 starts at a fairly approachable $45,000, but that's for a lower grade 2-liter turbo that only makes 184 horsepower. This one prices up to $57,000, and you kind of getting what you pay for. It's an entry-level luxury car. It's got some issues, but it's a good basic car. What about the X2's pricing?
Well, these new gen products have a way of getting a little bit more costly. And in the case of the base 28i trim, you're looking at a starting price of $52,000. Head up to the M35i like this, well, that presses up to around $62,000. That is not an inconsequential price delta. Now, the X1 is a little bit cheaper, a little bit closer to that, and is still of this new generation. But the BMW is either way a more expensive way about it. It's not just against the Audi either. This is more expensive than you're gonna look at in the GLA or GLB as well from Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, but ultimately for me what it comes down to with this comparison was first impressions. You get into that BMW, it's got those red seats, it's got those really nice materials, it's got those new screens. It's just, wow, it creates this little bit of impression. Like when you're buying your first luxury car, you want something to impress yourself, at least, if not other people. And that was the one thing that really let me down with the Q3. It's a perfectly good car, but you get into it, it's all black. Some of the materials are below par for what I expect of luxury. So that left me a little bit disappointed, even though it's better value and decently practical.
This is very true. Now, of course, a lot of this does depend on how you choose to spec something yourself, but in general, these BMW interiors are lending themselves to a more exciting sense of occasion every time you get in. And as I think we've seen here, finally, without feeling too heavy-handed.
I think we can say that we're agreed the X2 wins this comparison, but we'll bring the Audi Q3 back for a rematch next year when the 2026 arrives.
Yes, that long-awaited update to this very important product will be an excellent competitor to this.
For Driving.ca, I'm Jonathan Yarconi.
And I'm Al Alder. For more SUV news, reviews, specs, test, previews, and all the rest, be sure to follow us online on Driving.ca.